Committee, giving the opportunity to mark up this legislation today, providing transparency and accountability for the DHS contracting procurement process in regards to our southern border. In the 2.5 years since President Biden took office, the U.S. Customs and Border Protection has encountered 5.5 illegal immigrants across our southwest border. For context, that's more than the population of the state that I'm a representative of, the state of Oklahoma. As the humanitarian crisis at our southern border continues at unprecedented levels, crucial support services provided by contracting services ensure that our dedicated Border Patrol agents and CBP officers can remain focused on what they do best, securing our borders. And for that reason, this measure, H.R. 4467, the DHS Border Services Contract Review Act, is being introduced, and it directs the DHS Undersecretary for Management to assess contracts for covered services performed by contractor personnel along the U.S. border with Mexico to enhance coordination, minimize overlap, and increase cost effectiveness among these contracts. Federal contractors have provided essential services along the U.S.-Mexico border, and DHS has increasingly relied on service contracts to carry out its operation so that the department can focus on primary responsibilities. Between fiscal years 2013 and 2018, the DHS contracted services increased by 40%. However, it's important that we understand how DHS determines which services require contract personnel and how effective these contracts have been in carrying out the mission. If enacted, this bill is going to provide clarity on how service contracts are developed with DHS at the border and where there may be room for improvement. H.R. 4467 requires the USM to submit a report on active contracts to Congress on the criteria used to determine whether utilizing contracted personnel for border-related services is necessary. Further, it requires the USM to analyze the effectiveness of contracted personnel in addressing DHS's mission requirements along the border, including how the utilization of contracts enhances the capability for department personnel to perform their primary responsibilities in respect to the mission. It ensures that border support contracts are used efficiently, effectively, and that no lapse in service occurs. This bill requires the USM to provide recommendations and assessment of opportunities for increasing efficiencies with respect for contracts. Also, to ensure that taxpayer dollars are used responsibly includes a provision that prohibits the department from requesting additional funding to carry out the provisions of this bill. This legislation had bipartisan support last Congress, passing through the committee by voice vote. It did include an amendment by Representative Jackson Lee, which has been incorporated into this measure. Given the critical nature of the southwest border, it's my hope this legislation will continue to have bipartisan support. In closing, I want to thank Chairman Green, committee staff for your guidance on this measure, and urge all members to support common sense legislation. Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I yield back.